I'd like to speak last about a fiscal policy initiative that a few colleagues and I have been working on in BlackRock. And this is one which is close to heresy among some, because it proposes taking advantage of the fact that you can print money without having it worsen the budget deficit. The idea is as follows. We have very high levels of debt in Europe, in the United States. Now, if you're an optimist, you say, well, the interest rate is low, and actually what we're getting at the moment is very cheap fiscal policy, and the debt seems much larger, but the debt in terms of the burden that it is on the economy is not much larger, it's much smaller. And the amount of, for instance, in the American budget today, the amount of interest at a debt level of about 90% is much lower than it was at a debt level of 70% of GDP. So that situation is a bit mixed, but what you don't want anybody to believe is that you can go on spending, deficit spending without any consequences. So the proposal is as follows, that the Federal Reserve announce, in response to a government request, how much it thinks the money supply can be increased through a transfer from the central bank to the government, which the Fed will calculate how much is possible to print without any adverse consequences for inflation. Any consequence for inflation starts off not being in America, in the United States or here, starts off not being adverse. It starts off getting the inflation rate up to where we'd like it to be. At some later stage, it can be adverse. And that the agreement that is made is one between the Fed and the fiscal authority on how much can be spent on fiscal spending for an addition to the budget. So it's a way of getting an effectively positive fiscal policy at almost zero cost in terms of its impact on the debt, but on a positive impact on output. And that can be done. Now, people who want to tell us we're heretics, and I guess this is not the city which figures out who the heretics are, that must be in Spain somewhere. But the idea of that you can spend, the government can spend money with no consequences whatever, is mentioned frequently by those people who believe in MMT, modern monetary theory as it's called in the United States. This is not that, because they don't say there are limits to what you can do here. That's why the Fed has to be in there doing the calculation of what you can do via creation of money. As long as you're not taking the country into dangerous areas in terms of inflation, other aspects of the budget, this thing is relatively cheap and could be done. We did not, in that article, which you will find on the BlackRock website, we did not in that article describe the institutional framework in which this will work. Why? Because I've been in many occasions over my life in which there's a problem and people come and design a very complicated mechanism to deal with the problem. That complicated mechanism of how many people will be on the fiscal advisory board and how many people will be here usually attracts a great deal of attention and allows them to say, it doesn't make any sense. I said there should be 7 members of the board and they only want 5. That's terrible. That's not the level at which this has to be thought about. It has to be thought about, does the basic idea make sense? I think it does. I think it should receive further attention from major institutions in the United States, in Europe, and maybe the Chinese will do it, or maybe they're already doing it, for all we know. And I hope that we go ahead and look at this with the seriousness that I think the proposal deserves. Thank you.
Thank you.